Everyone, and welcome to today's live podcast. I am the Universe with Martin Cowart, and I'm so excited to have a longtime dear friend of mine, Jenn T. Grace. I would say she is the guru of self-publishing, particularly in the LGBTQ world and our allies. And I know that for myself, and I'm getting close to that, when I'm ready to write my book, I would not even think about doing it without her help. So I'm really excited about having her come on our show. And so, Jenn, what I'd like to do is start out just asking you to tell our audience today, give them a little teaser about what is a big aha, what is a big takeaway that they could expect from listening to our conversation today.
Well, I feel like that's a hefty request to have an aha. We can't always plan ahas, but what we can do is show up as our full selves and express whatever it is that's, as you would say, on our hearts, right? And kind of go from there. So for me, I would hope that this conversation today will help others see more into the lens through a lens of what's actually happening globally and through all the humanitarian work that you're doing. And so I'm hoping that maybe we'll have a different kind of lens or a different take on a topic that you're very passionate about and you talk about a lot that I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form. So I assume that I will be asking you questions that maybe your listeners or those watching would also be asking. So that's my hope for today.
Well, I think that's a great biggest thing. It is awareness. And for me, the most heartbreaking part of all this is there's a little bit of a lack of interest. So I'm hoping that the more aware and people understand the magnitude of the problem, the more they can feel what's going on over there. That's what I really hope happens today, is that people really feel from our conversation some empathy and some compassion for our brothers and sisters that are in Africa. That's my intention. And that leads us to today's influencer. And before every week I give an influencer, I put out somebody who's influenced my life to get me to where I am today. And one of my biggest influencers is Brene Brown. And you also said she is one of your biggest influencers. So today I'm going to dedicate this show to an influencer of both of ours, Brene Brown. And to me, she's such an appropriate influencer for this show in particular, when we're talking about having people feel with empathy and compassion and be vulnerable, because she says that the bravest thing anyone will ever do is to share their story. And for someone who's in the storytelling business, helping people share their story, I'd love to hear your feelings about Brene Brown and how she's influenced you in your life. And then we'll go from there. How about that, Jenn?
Yeah, sounds good. Well, I don't know that I have met a single person who doesn't like Brene, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people who are diehard Brene fans, and there's people who are like, I've heard of her, I like her. But I haven't heard anybody, there's no pillaging with forks and torches saying like, pitchforks and torches of anti-Brene Brown. So I feel like it kind of goes without saying in many ways that, you know, that she's just fantastic at how she delivers her messages. I think what is beautiful about her is the way that she is so relatable, so approachable. Even though she is this huge public figure, there's such a down-to-earth relatableness to her. Even I'm pretty sure I've listened to all of her audiobooks. She narrates them. She's, again, just so down to earth that you can't help but implement what it is that she's saying. But the one thing that I remember the most about her work is there's this little cartoon that I don't even know what the full context of it is, but it goes into the difference between empathy and sympathy. And she's got like this whole kind of cartoon of basically how to work with people through from an empathetic standpoint versus being from a sympathetic standpoint. And I found it to be so fascinating that I've used it, not recently, in trainings in the past, to just kind of show people the difference between those two things. And it was just her way of framing that whole conversation that made it so much easier to kind of simplify to others. So that's the
Wow.
takeaway.
Now, that is the whole issue response to the crisis in Uganda. The difference between sympathy and empathy. And I'm not sure exactly how Brene did it in her illustration, but to me, sympathy is when we feel we feel sorry for people for their circumstances. And that, yes, there are times when we want to feel sympathy. We want to feel, people need to feel, they need to They need sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really what people really want and need right now. We need people to feel into empathy. We need people to feel what it would feel like to be a gay person living in a country that told you that for being gay, they can put you to death.
Mm-hmm.
Just feel the enormity of that truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when you feel that, you will feel something different than sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my invitation today to people listening. If you don't understand, I want you to invite you today to just listen from a place of, I don't know what's going on. I don't understand, but what does this feel like to me
Mm-hmm.
when I hear these stories?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if we come to a place of empathy, then we can move to a place of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And empathy and compassion are exactly the tools that the universe does to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why our response, from my perspective, needs to be focused on how do we respond from a place of love, empathy, and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and I know you're not an expert on what's happening in Uganda, and that's not really necessary. I don't know all the details of what's going on in Uganda either. I know what the impact is.
Mm-hmm.
And we can just talk about it from the standpoint of the impact of it. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions. That might be one way. You know, you could ask questions from a place of empathy and compassion to have a better understanding. So I'm going to just, one thing I like about having my guests is I kind of, particularly someone like you who's got got your own show and your own stuff, is that I kind of feel like you're kind of my co-host today more than my guest. So I'm welcome to move this forward any direction that you're feeling right now. Okay.
Well, you know what's coming up for me while you're talking is I can tap into my empathy around what's happening simply from a standpoint of being a queer woman, right? So I'm not living in Africa. So I can just imagine and put myself in the shoes for just a minute to think what would happen if I were here in the United States and all of a sudden there were a law that made my life punishable, you know, my queerness punishable by death, right? And we have a lot of legislation that is occurring across the United States right now that is very harmful to the LGBTQ community. So it's not that far of a stretch to be able to like really sit into that as a queer person myself. But what my question to you would be is for those that are watching that are not part of the LGBTQ community who may not have a tie into it, how do we help them find that place of empathy? Because I think empathy, so much about empathy is trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I think for us, it's easy for us to put ourselves in the shoes of those in Uganda because it could be us, right? If we just happen to be born in that country, it could be us. But those that don't have I almost said privilege of being able to kind of, because in some ways I do think that there's a lot that goes into being an LGBTQ person that is a benefit, right? Because I think it makes us multidimensional. It makes us more empathetic, I think, to others in very different ways. But for those that aren't, and there's no tie-in, like what can we discuss that can help them really tap into their empathetic
That's a great question. And I think that's a question that let's just call them our allies for today. Okay. Let's just call these are people who already feel a certain amount of empathy for us because that's how they became our allies.
Yeah.
They've created some empathy because you're right. They don't know what it's like to be gay, but they know what it's like to be marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a straight Black woman, I don't know what it is to be a straight Black woman, but I know what it's like to be marginalized as a white gay man.
Mm-hmm.
So if we feel into where we have been marginalized and we have been told we are worthless and we're not as good as someone in a what we call a more privileged position, which is really in this country the only real person that kind of lives in sort of a completely non-target space is a straight white educated male.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so one of the groups is how would you get that group to feel empathetic?
Mm-hmm.
Well, even in their case, they know what it feels like to suffer loss of something that they love,
Mm-hmm.
and to be told that your life is worthless because of who you are. You can feel what it's like to lose something that you feel is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Something as valuable as your life being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
that's how I would suggest it. Think about in terms of where have you felt the most vulnerable in your life? Where have you felt the most sense of loss and and fear? Where have you felt like you were being attacked for being who you were? Go back. You don't have to be gay. Go back to your childhood and think about when you were bullied. I've had a lot of straight friends tell me they were bullied for being different. I mean, when I was a little boy, I didn't know what gay was. I was just a little sissy boy who preferred to bake cakes and play baseball. So I was always made fun of for that, and bullied by nice Christian white women whose sons were all played baseball, but I didn't fit in with that crowd. So all of us can find that place where we have been bullied and put down and made to feel less than because of something somebody said or did. And that's the best thing I can think of is as you're hearing these stories, think about times in your life when you were when you felt shame. That's the real, and Brene Brown talks about that a lot, is the feelings of shame and vulnerability when we feel like we're not really quite as good as everybody else on the planet.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good starting point, but I still think that there's probably plenty of people who will still struggle with that. And I also, another question to you, I feel like, again, I am a co-host. My other question to you is,
I love being the reverse role.
How do we get people to care, right? Like, how do we get people to care? And I will give you just a personal example that my partner's Ukrainian and has a nonprofit that supports Ukraine getting medical supplies on the front lines. It has been over a year. And mind you, the war started well before last February. The world cared for a hot minute, and now no one cares. And that was something that was highly publicized, like everybody knew about it, right? Whereas what we're talking about is it affects a small percentage of a population in one country on a continent where no one seems to care. So how do we get people to care even when we have the world support around something and it still fades off really quickly? Like, how do we get people to take notice now? Because there's so many people who are like, it's happening in Africa. That doesn't impact me at all. Right. Because I think there's such is it cognitive dissonance, right? That occurs where it's like, well, that doesn't impact me. Like, what do I have to do about it? What can I do about it? It really has nothing to do with me, especially for someone who is not part of the LGBTQ community. Because I think there's plenty of us in the community that people aren't paying attention, nor do they care. So how do we move that needle to get people to just care more?
Well, I love that question. And as you were telling it, I didn't have an answer for you. And I'll tell you what we're doing. And I don't know if it's going to work or not. And I think the way you learn to care is you learn to get to know them. You get to know them personally. And so I love it because you gave me an opportunity to plug something that we're doing at the Diamond Mine Academy, my team and I. We are hosting every single morning at 7:00 from 7:30 open morning wake up meditations. Now, what this comes from is something that my team and I have been doing. Let me give you a paint a picture. All of my team are Africans living in a safe house in Africa, in Kenya. And for safety. And they're all working with me, and they're all helping me create this thing called the Diamond Mine Academy, which is going to be helping, we'll talk about later, is really a place where you can actually plug in and actually make a difference. But before we get there, is that you can come, anybody is welcome, and we put it on Zoom. Everybody is welcome to come and join us at 7:00 to meditate. And let me just tell you something about these guys. These guys, each week they take a turn. We started doing this back a year ago. We started working together because we were so far apart. They're here and I'm here and they're in Africa. And we found that when we came together and got into this zone of genius, like you and I did before the show, we come in and we intentionally set an intention to go out, go into our hearts, get beyond the mind and into this higher mind consciousness, this loving energy of the universe, which is the energy it's what I teach. This is how we're going to change the world, is by getting into this higher level of consciousness. We call it, in my world, we call it Christ consciousness. We call it, it could be called, Joe Dispenza calls it the quantum field. It doesn't really matter, but it's that field beyond the mind where everything happens. So we get into that space together. And it didn't take long. It gave the Book of Mormon a whole new sense of understanding, because these African men, I think that's why I call them diamonds. They've been living under so much pressure that once they came alive, that heart is huge. And they're just so much more spiritually evolved than anybody I've ever met in America. And I've met some pretty spiritual. I'm a teacher, and I've met some pretty So the opportunity here for you to answer that question is very easy. It's free. We're there. Everybody, it's a great way to start your day, is to come and join us and let these beautiful African men lead you into your heart and just have a conversation and get to know them, get to hear their stories, let them get to know you. Because they have a whole different perception of white people. They think we all are millionaires with money to give away. You know, they have a whole different perception. But the way we get to that place of empathy is to create platforms where people can actually get to know each other. And now as we're moving more into virtual space, I mean, I live in virtual space. Virtual space to me is more real. This is more real to me than my living room. Because this is where I live. This is where you live. This is where the world's living. And we're now living what I would call 3D chess in all of our decisions throughout the day. So we need to get into a space. And I can tell you that I don't live in I live in infinite space and time most of the time. And it's a wonderful way to live. I never think about not having enough time or not having enough resources. Because I'm the universe and I've got infinite time, infinite space, infinite resources. And when you get into that space, climb into that with other people, that's how we change the world. And Eckhart Tolle said something the other day, we cannot even be change agents until we're able to get into the space of now. When we get into the present moment and we connect with this force, that's how we become real change agents. So that's the best way I would. So that's it. Get to know him. Get to know it. Really get to. You can. It's just a matter of turning on your Zoom, click on 2 buttons, and all of a sudden you're sitting in the middle of Africa with some really cool people.
So amazing. The virtual connectedness is just so amazing in so many ways. And I think so, like, I'm trying to almost play devil's advocate because clearly I am on the Martin train. I am 100% in support and favor, and I understand what is happening. But I feel like there is such a divide among people, and there always seems to be an excuse for why someone can't do a thing. So what would you say if someone's like, Martin, I love the idea of this meditation thing, but it makes me uncomfortable, or the timing doesn't work, or insert any number of excuses that someone could come up with here? How do you respond to that?
Well, I wouldn't say thank you because there's no point in arguing. This is what I know to be true. I love that question as a teacher. If you're responding no to me, I'm giving you look at what I'm offering you. I am the universe. I'm well connected to Joy the Wise Woman. I, the universe, am offering you an opportunity to connect with me and learn about who you are and what you're here for. I am used to the universe, people ignoring me and saying no. They're just not able to hear it. And I just kept coming back and saying it again and again, because I come from a place of unconditional love. So I'm always inviting people into this space. So what I know to be true is that they're putting up a limiting belief about themselves that says why they can't do this. So I don't look at it as they don't care. They can't see it yet. So what I do is I just try to be a brighter light. I just try to be a brighter light and shine, so I can shine through their belief system, their shadow belief, it's a limiting belief. Whenever anybody says I can't afford it, I don't have enough time, or any of those not enoughs, not enough, anything that's got a not enough in it, not enough, I'm not enough, you're not enough. That's a scarcity mindset, and it's never true. It's never true. You've got more than enough.
Well, we have our freedom to the majority of freedom comparative to what is happening in Uganda, where the freedom is completely limited, and people's lives are completely on the line right now. And that just seems like that is something that I don't think we here can fully understand. I think the majority of people can't really understand the level of atrocity that's actually occurring.
Yeah, let me just reflect. You're bringing up something that I think is very interesting. May or might know, but part of my story was that I was an early responder to 9/11. after the World Trade Center, and I spent 9 months down there. And I know what you mean. In the beginning, everybody wanted to come and volunteer. Everybody wanted to participate. Everybody wanted to give money. But when it became like 6-7 months out there, and it's just a big pile of dirt and with body parts in it, the firemen are digging out with garden tools, and the work has not changed any since we started in September. It's just longer and more grueling hours, and you're right, no one really cares anymore. And someone wanted to ask me, said, how do you guys say, well, I can't hardly leave. It's such like being bathed in pure loving light down there. But what I noticed was that people just, once I got further and further away from the area, and the time got further and further, people just didn't care. But I'm going to share something else with you, an observation, and there are consequences. Prior to and I'm not saying it's any judgment. I'm just going to tell you the true story. But prior to 2001, I lived with a fairly famous artist in the Hamptons. We had a house in the Sag Harbor, and we had an artist studio in Chelsea. And we were like quite big deal queer people. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about. We were having lunch with Edward Albee. And, it was just, he was a wonderful person. I'm not saying anything unkind about Edward. He's a great guy. But that's the life we lived, okay?
Yeah.
And I thought these were all my friends. You know, I thought they were just wonderful, great friends. And then in that year, I broke up with that man. And then we had 9/11 happen. And there are probably 3 people. There are only 3 people. One of them is still one of my very best friends that I called to help me. And only one showed up. Nobody else had time. And those people who showed up and became part of it are my friends today.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody else. And it's not that I just moved to another whole value system. It's everything in the universe can be explained by energy, frequency, and vibration. And the energy frequency that I was living in the Hamptons with all that just shifted. And I wasn't interested in that energy any longer. I was interested in a different type of energy. So that's really all that I can say, that there are consequences to it if you want to keep your head down. But this is the thing. You're missing out on a great opportunity to connect with a deeper part of yourself that you may not even know exists.
Yeah.
And that's that zone of genius. What's really happening, what's really happening is you're missing the opportunity to connect with your own heart, to connect with your own wisdom, your own genius, your own divine nature, which is where all your power is, by the way. So if for any other reason, do it for a very selfish reason, to empower yourself with the power of God.
Yeah.
What more reason could you do it than that?
And you have such an easy access point, right? Because I think sometimes we hear about things on the news, and, I feel like people like yourself and myself, collectively, we know a lot of people, right? So no matter what is happening for any particular reason, I can find someone I know that knows something about the thing. Whereas I think the average American, I'll just speak America specifically, the average American doesn't necessarily have an entry point or an access point to a thought leader about a particular topic, or to somebody who can explain some really horrific thing that's occurring in the world. And so that is a place of privilege for people like you and I, where we know, but at the same time, we have to use that place of privilege as an entry point for those that don't have it. So I love what you're doing, because you're making what's happening accessible to others by inviting them in to a safe space where they can just come in, be themselves, and just learn and be in the presence of someone else who can share their different lived experience and their different life experience from Uganda in this particular case. And I think that there's something so beautiful and powerful about that should make that an easy yes. Or at least maybe it's okay, I'm going to say yes to this, but I'm still a little bit nervous. So I'm going to baby step into it. Whatever it takes. You're not asking for someone to write $1,000 check. You're not asking somebody to sponsor a family. You're asking people to show up for a meditation led by an African that's in a safe house. This is not a hard ask, in my opinion.
It's not a hard ask. It's really, and let me add one other thing. Everybody that's shown up keeps coming back.
Not surprised.
They keep coming back, and they're there. I had a woman the other day who came, and she's just like, my life has changed so much just by being here. She's working as a custodian in a high school in Ohio. And
Mhm.
now she goes to work every day with so much joy because she's been woken up to this love in her heart to clean a school auditorium. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the transformational nature of getting into this higher dimension of unconditional love. You
Mhm.
just love whatever you're doing, whether
Yeah.
it's doing what we also love, which is being out on stage somewhere, or we
Mhm.
enjoy just washing the dishes because we're happy to be alive.
Mhm. Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
makes a difference in how you're going to live that day.
Mhm.
Uh, and to be guided by the universe itself is a wonderful way to live. I got to tell you, it's pretty exciting.
I would agree. Yeah, you just kinda roll with it.
You just roll
You
what
never know
she's got going
what the
on.
day is gonna bring.
Yeah, like I said, that other day when the bishop asked me to write down what the universe told me in that brief moment, she
Mhm.
said, "The universe told me," and this has kind of become my mantra: "Let go. Something really magical is about to happen." And that's
Mhm.
what I find to be true. When I let go of all that stuff in the past and all those worries and all those doubts, I can't do this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just let it all go completely and just fall into that love and just
Mhm.
feel that love in your heart. All of a sudden, the world just becomes wildly exciting.
'Cause you just have to live in the moment, and you brought up Eckhart Tolle before, but The Power
Mhm.
of Now is an incredible, incredible book that
Oh,
if
it's
you read
amazing.
nothing else, just read because the whole thing, like, it's an entire book dedicated to the idea of just being in the moment. Like, it took 200 pages to just really be in the point of just be in the moment. Stop worrying about what happened 5 minutes ago. Stop worrying what's gonna happen in 5 minutes. Just sitting in that present moment, and I feel like as easy as that sounds, I think it is one of the hardest things for people to
It is
physically accomplish.
it is one of the hardest things people can do is to
Mhm,
tell this thing that wants to talk all the time and thinks it knows everything about everything and knows
mhm,
nothing about anything and is never telling us the truth. It's got to constantly tell us to kind of hope us make us finally believe it.
mhm.
But it's the hardest thing in the world to shut that thing up.
Sure
It is
is.
the hardest thing in the world to do. So
Mhm,
I understand. Again, don't have to do it alone. Come join us at 7 o'clock on Zoom, and
mhm.
it'll be a lot easier because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's fun. You'll enjoy it. That's what I
Mhm,
can tell you. It's meditation should not be boring. It is when you're doing it right. It is really fun and exciting.
mhm. Yeah.
So that's what I would say. And then Eckhart Tolle, I'm glad you mentioned him. He's a big influencer of mine.
Mhm,
And there's an Audible book that this is kind of a sequel to the Power of Now. It's called Stillness Speaks,
mhm,
and it's an Audible book where he narrates it, and he does each chapter. He does a chapter on the now, and each chapter they're about 10 minutes each chapter, and they're done slowly enough where they're actually guided meditations. So
That's
if you want
awesome.
to get kind of the transference
Mhm,
of that message, which I get. I listened to the Power of Now, the chapter on Now this week
mm.
because I needed to kind of I needed to be reminded.
Yeah, like a refresher.
I needed to get reminded of the power of now. And he
Mhm,
reminded me again. So, and those kind of books are not things that we can just read and put back on the shelf. They're things that
mhm,
we can pull off and read and reread and reread and reread and reread. And every time
mhm.
I read it or hear it, I get something new from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, because 'cause we've evolved as people, we've put those suggestions into practice, and then we're going back to the well again, and it's still plentiful. There's always something new to explore.
Yeah, I love it. What's something I'll share with you, and then I want to ask you some questions about how people can get in touch with you
Mhm,
because I'm just so curious. You throw out so many things that I like to talk about. But one of them is, oh God, I gave myself so much leadway. I forgot what I was going to tell you.
I love it. I love
Anyway,
it. This is
wait,
the
no,
joy of a live video. You never know what's gonna happen.
and that's what I'm doing. I just feel like you met me. During COVID. I did a daily show.
Mhm,
And I've spoken before is that to me, I'm chronologically, I'm talking about what I'm doing and what the
mhm,
world's doing today during this
mhm.
crisis. And I'm
Yeah,
sharing that story with the world in a raw, real way. And I think that's
absolutely.
important. I think that's very important.
I agree.
So, so Jen, tell us a little bit about how people could get in touch with you if they got an idea. And I'm telling you something, if you ever thought about writing a book, and now with Chat GPT, it might be easier than ever. He's a very good helper for me. Jen, how can people get in touch with you and have a conversation with you to find out more about how you might help them finally put that book out into the world?
Yeah, so you can go to publishyourpurpose.com, or you could even go to meetwithjenn.com, with Jen with 2 N's, and that'll bring you right to my calendar. Keep it real simple. I try to be as simple as possible, but I'm on all social at Jenn T Grace, and Publish Your Purpose is on all the social as well. But whatever way it takes for you to get to us, I'm happy to have a conversation to figure out how to help birth your book. Because I feel like, good information, good content, good stories. There's never a shortage of that. And I don't think that will ever change. So I'm looking forward to chatting with anyone who's got a book on their mind.
Well, if you're like thinking, that's a good idea, but I'm just too afraid, let that limiting belief go and just go do it anyway. And I promise you'll be really happy that you had this conversation with Jenn.
Yeah.
And at least you'll know what's required and can get you kind of excited about doing that, because I think there's a book in everybody, and particularly these days and times. So thank you.
And I have a lot of free resources on the website too. I mean, a lot of resources that are there that you don't even need to talk to me to get. Just go have at and see where they take you.
That's good. Let me just tell everybody too about one thing that anyone can do if you want to participate and find out more about what's going on in Africa. Is just go to our website, www.diamondmine, M-I-N-E, like diamond, like a mine for diamonds, diamondmineacademy.org. That's diamondmineacademy.org. That will give you all of the information about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how you can participate. And one of the things I want people to know that's very exciting we've done is we have just recently opened up the donation options so that you can participate in saving someone's life for as little as $35 a month. So we've removed that larger dollar out. It takes about $1,000 to take care of somebody, because you've got to have a place to house them and feed them and take care of them in a safe place. So it takes money. And so we figure it takes about $1,000 per person. We've got about $1,000. That's about $1 million. So we're trying to raise $1 million, and we'd love some help to do that. So you can, again, go to our website. You'll find out all about it, and you can read some of our, I put out a blog every week about this. I have this show every week about it, but there's all kinds of ways that you can get involved. But what we really need right now is some financial support to help actually move people to a very safe place, because what's happened is that some of the camps and and being on the street right now as a gay person is very risky, because all of the hate rhetoric has made it perfectly okay for gangs and homophobic people to go out and hunt us down and hurt us and cause us harm. So and the police don't really care. I mean, we're a second-class citizen, and they just don't care. So it's a real problem. So go to our website, take a look at that, and we love. And if anybody wants to get to know me, again, I'm pretty accessible. You can find anything you want to find by going to my Linktree account at Martin_Cowart, and you can find out everything you ever want to know about me, and more probably than you ever want to know about me. Well, Jenn, this has been an absolute joy having you on the show, and it's always fun to see and be with you. And I really do appreciate my queer siblings here in the United States who have woken up and who are in support, who are willing to get on a Zoom live show with me at last moment, because this was something that happened in the last few days. I didn't have a guest, and she just said, I'm available, let's go. Come on, we'll have a conversation. So thank you for that, and thank you for being of support to us, and keeping the message.
Thank you for having me. All right, bye everyone.
Bye everyone.